must be more to life than this. Reaching for the stars, traveling so far, like a dragonfly. Just grab my hand from heaven send. With me tonight, I run away. We'll never forget the past, but what counts is our brand new start. Even if it hurts me or I get scared, just come take this risk now. We'll be prepared. I run away. I run away. Reaching for the stars, traveling so far, like a dragonfly. Keep your secrets there, keep them everywhere. Just you and I run away. I run away.
Breathe you in like oxygen. Oh, and in other words, I'm reaching out for arms, I'm drowning in the open-ended love with me, girl. Exhale the past, inhale a future that lasts. Change my heart, change my mind. For the last time, wanna believe in the life I've led. I don't wanna leave another word unsaid. You know my heart will follow you in tomorrow. In tomorrow. Holding on to memories that we've shared. My evidence you once really cared. I'm reaching for a hand to pull me up. One open to an everlasting love. Exhale the past, inhale a future that lasts. Change my heart, change my mind. For the last time, wanna believe in the life I've led.
Kia ora, good afternoon and welcome to this One News coverage of the 1 p.m. presser. Currently, there are 107 cases identified in the community in a number of locations of interest. That's now hit 420. We will hear the latest case numbers shortly from Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she expects the number of COVID cases to increase today. It comes as Alert Level 4 restrictions for most of the country will be reviewed on Friday, while Auckland's lockdown is in place for at least another week.
With Delta, we are seeing a much higher rate of households becoming infected. And so that's one of the reasons you're getting those big numbers. But it does mean as we go along that we may move into a space where we're just dealing with household members. That's the place we want to get to.
Despite no cases detected in the South Island, University of Canterbury's Professor Michael Planck says keeping the entire country at the highest alert level was the right call.
We know that there are at least 150 close contacts identified outside of the Auckland and Waikato regions. Quite a number of those were in the South Island, and they're just the ones we know about.
Well, joining us now is political editor Jessica Mackay from Parliament. Thanks for joining us, Jess. What are the latest developments this morning?
So today, the list of locations of interest have gone up to 420 odd, so that's growing and growing each day. The latest ones that have been added today are a couple of supermarkets, a Bunnings, for example, and a Subway. So for people in Auckland, it is worth going on to the Ministry of Health website and checking those locations of interest again to be certain about the times and to make sure that you're following the instructions on there. So those ballooning cases of interest there are still a concern as those case numbers continue to go up. Now, there have been reports today that an MIQ worker has tested positive for COVID-19. That hasn't been confirmed yet, so we will be asking questions about that in the theaterette shortly when things get underway. And of course, we will get those latest case numbers, but we have been told this morning that there are new cases to expect today. So we'll get all of that and ask all of those questions in a few minutes' time.
And just as this goes on, the financial impact grows, there's also more money for businesses.
Yes, so the resurgence support payment is now available for businesses. This is separate from the wage subsidy. So this payment is $1,500 per business plus $400 for every staff member up to 50. So it's for those medium to small businesses. So they can use that for things like rent, for example. It doesn't have to be spent on wages. So that is now available under these level 4 lockdowns. Now, just an update on the wage subsidy, which helps keep people in jobs. That has now gone up to $484 million that has been spent on that. So some interesting data coming through on that. The Finance Minister and Dr. Ashley Bloomfield are just making their way in now. There is also support for people who are having to stay at home awaiting a COVID test, and those numbers have gone up as well while we've been waiting for all of that. There are also going to be questions to the Finance Minister about that $62 billion pot of money that's designed to help businesses and help our economy get through this COVID crisis. At the moment, there are reports that it's about $5 to $6 billion that are left in that. When we're spending about $1 billion a week on COVID costs, that doesn't leave a whole lot of money left. So let's hear from them now and get the latest on all of that.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll shortly hand over to Dr. Bloomfield to run through today's case numbers, and then after that I will give a brief update on the economic support measures that we have in place before taking all of your questions. Just before I do hand to Dr. Bloomfield, I have some positive news on the vaccination front. Yesterday was our best day ever for vaccinations, and the first time that we've had more than 60,000 in a day. In fact, 63,333. This is a tremendous result and an incredible effort by our vaccinators working under level 4 conditions. I genuinely want to thank all New Zealanders who are part of the vaccination program. Ramping up our vaccine rollout is an important part of our plan. We've got to stamp out this outbreak of the virus, vaccinate our population, and move forward on our Reconnecting New Zealand plan as we laid out last week. Getting vaccination results like this is an important step forward. Dr. Bloomfield.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Kia ora koutou katoa. So today I can report there are 41 new positive cases of COVID-19 in the community. So our total number of confirmed cases associated with the Auckland community outbreak is 148. Of those cases, 38 are in Auckland and 3 are in Wellington. All 3 in Wellington are known close contacts of existing cases. These cases in Wellington were actually first identified 2 evenings ago, but only appear in our numbers today. All cases are being transferred or have been transferred to a quarantine facility. So of our total cases, 137 are in Auckland and 11 in Wellington. No cases anywhere else around the Motu, including in Coromandel. 89 have been epidemiologically linked so far to the Auckland outbreak. The remaining 59 are still to confirm an epidemiological link, but for the vast majority, it's already clear that they either are a household or other close contact, or they were at a location of interest. We'll have more information on that later in the day. There are 8 COVID-19 positive patients associated with our current community outbreak who are in hospital. None are in ICU, all are in negative pressure ventilation rooms in the 3 hospitals across the Auckland region. Further to the community cases, there is just 1 case to report in managed isolation today. So as each new community case is reported, isolated and investigated, we are learning more about the spread of this outbreak. With our latest cluster, we do know what actions will slow the spread of the virus, and we expect to see that slowing will begin to happen during this week. So each identified case is asked about where they have been during their infectious period, and from later today we are wanting to start to put up information as up to date as possible about how many of these cases may have been out and about during their infectious period as we move beyond their first week in Alert Level 4. The whole genome sequencing is continuing to play a key role, and ESR is rapidly sequencing and analysing genomes on a daily basis. We have now 80 genomes sequenced, all linked to the outbreak, and there are several mutations that are appearing that are helping to identify subclusters and again help us get around those particular subclusters. The majority of cases in the outbreak are now of Samoan ethnicity, and in large part that's a reflection of the largest subcluster, which is one centred around the Assembly of God Church in Mangere, which has approximately 58 cases, or to date 58 cases linked to it. Investigations are ongoing there. And I would just like to sincerely acknowledge the Samoan community and indeed the wider Pacific community for their response to the request for testing, and that is proceeding very well. The second largest subcluster is the network of cases that surrounded our very first cases. We're calling that the Birkdale Social Group, and that has approximately 23 cases in it. The number of contacts continues to increase. As of 9 a.m. today, there were 15,741 contacts who have been formally identified. Most of those are classified as close contacts. For comparison, at this point in the outbreak in August last year in Auckland, there were around 1,500 close contacts, so more than 10 times the number of close contacts identified. 9,757 have been followed up and are self-isolating, and obviously there's ongoing work to contact the remaining contacts. We have a big increase in our contact tracing capacity that started to come on board from last night from other government departments and indeed from the private sector as well. So there are now nearly 900 frontline contact tracers in call centres and other places around the country. I do have just some of the key metrics already from our contact tracing, and these are focused on our what were formerly known as close pass contacts, but I would call them the very closest contacts. There are 369 of them, and of them 90% have been contacted. That was at 8 a.m. this morning. 100% of people had so this is some other metrics. 100% is the time from notification to case interviews. So all of our cases are interviewed within 24 hours. Likewise, of the contacts recorded in the NCTS, 89% were contacted, of the contacts were found and traced within 48 hours of the case notification. That's of our very close contacts. And the time from exposure event to contact identification, the metric is over 80% within 24 hours, and that's sitting at 75% at the moment. On locations of interest, since the last update, there's an additional 100 locations of interest and now over 400 across the Motu. So I do again encourage people to continually check the Ministry's website. There is obviously the functionality with the map and the ability to search to identify locations of interest that may be relevant to you. Now, last evening I spoke with my counterpart in Australia, the Department of Health Secretary, Professor Brendan Murphy, and it struck me, he remarked during that conversation that combating Delta in the community is like dealing with a whole new virus. That is our experience in New Zealand too. Delta is unlike our previous experience. It is, as we know, highly infectious and transmissible, and as we have seen, spreads rapidly. This reinforces just how critical it is that people do follow the level 4 rules, staying at home, only leaving the house for essential reasons like getting a test or a vaccination, going to the doctor, pharmacy or supermarket, exercising safely close to home, or going to work if you're an essential worker. If you have been in contact with someone who is infectious with COVID-19, you will be given more detailed advice by Healthline or public health officials on what that means for you. In some cases, if there's been a high risk of infection, it means everyone in the household must stay home and not leave the house until the person receives a negative test at day 5. This means staying home by everybody, full stop. There is support available if people need food or other essential services, and that can be achieved by, if you haven't already been referred, by calling the Ministry of Social Development phone number 0800 559 009 or calling Healthline, who will refer you. The purpose of the daily check-ins for our close contacts and cases is to make sure that they are both well and that they have all their welfare needs being met. Testing remains a priority, and yesterday there were 35,376 tests processed across the country. To everyone who has turned out to be tested, thank you very much. The waits are getting less, certainly in Auckland, with primary care back doing a large number of tests. The waits were much lower around the community testing centres, of which there are now 22 across the Auckland region. 26,500 of the swabs taken yesterday were across Tamaki Makaurau. In Wellington, there were around 2,500 tests processed yesterday, and there are 11 community testing centres open again today, as well as primary care, general practice doing testing. When you go for a test, please do try and take your NHI number with you. That will be on a hospital letter, or you may have it already loaded on the app, but you can also use the Ministry's 0800 number to find that out, 0800 855 066. On wastewater testing, there are no unexpected detections and our most recent test results available. The only one outside of Auckland is at Moa Point here in Wellington, as we have seen over the last 3 days. The second sample from Warkworth has come back negative, and furthermore, ESO were actually able to isolate the RNA from the wastewater sample from Warkworth and had enough of a match on the whole genome sequence to show the link to the current outbreak. It's likely this was someone who was transiently in Warkworth, but as I say, the follow-up testing has been negative. The hospitals across the Auckland region are doing well this morning. All the testing of the staff at both North Shore Hospital and at Auckland Hospital is complete, with no positive tests there. And finally, the Deputy Prime Minister has talked about the record number of vaccinations done yesterday and the great progress there. On a separate but related note, yesterday at 8:03 in the morning, our COVID vaccination health line took its 1 millionth inbound call. This was taken by one of the operators, Sarah, who studies and works from home in Christchurch. But the person was actually from the Central North Island, requiring assistance with rescheduling their appointment, doing exactly the right thing because they felt unwell. There are more than 2,000 people working on the COVID vaccination health line. That's in addition to all the people we have on contact tracing, and more than 500 are Te Reo or Pacific language speakers. So anyone can ring and can get help with booking their vaccine if they need it. And on its busiest day, which was the 19th of August, the service spoke to more than 24,000 people, and we can see that flowing through into the number of vaccinations being done. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bloomfield. I would just note Dr. Bloomfield has to attend the Select Committee this afternoon, so we will be finishing the press conference just on 2 to enable him to prepare for that. As Dr. Bloomfield's indicated, we do have a wide range of supports available to people to be able to deal with COVID-19, and I just want to speak briefly about those now. The first one I want to mention is the Leave Support Scheme. This is a scheme that is available for employers, including the self-employed, to help pay employees who need to self-isolate and cannot work from home. This support is paid as a lump sum for a 2-week period of $600 per week for full-time workers and $359 a week for part-time workers. It is important that employers and employees work together to make sure they're making use of the Leave Support Scheme. We also have the short-term absence payment. This is available for businesses, including self-employed people, to help pay workers who cannot work from home while they wait for a COVID-19 test result. Again, this is paid at the same rates as the other schemes of $600 for a full-time worker and $359 for each part-time worker. I would advise anyone who is in a situation where they are required to work, they cannot work from home, and they are required to be at home for self-isolation purposes, to be talking to their employer about those schemes. They are very important. In addition to that, at 8 a.m. this morning, the Resurgence Support Payment Scheme kicked in across the country. Alongside the wage subsidy, which came into effect on Friday, the Resurgence payment helps and supports businesses affected by New Zealand's move to Alert Level 4. Both schemes are designed to offer some certainty in what is a very uncertain time. The Resurgence payment is available nationally to any business or organisation that has experienced a 30% or greater drop in revenue or a 30% decline in capital raising ability over a 7-day period due to the alert level increase. This payment can help with things like rent or fixed costs, and you can apply whether you're a business or self-employed. It's paid at a flat rate of $1,500 per business and then $400 per full-time equivalent employee up to 50 full-time equivalent employees. This means the maximum amount payable under the scheme, which is a one-off payment, is $21,000. We urge anyone who thinks they may be eligible to go onto the Inland Revenue website and find out more. And I can say that as of the first 4 or so hours of operation of the scheme today, 26,000 applications have been made for that payment. In addition, we also have the wage subsidy scheme. This came into effect on Friday, and we've had processed 127,935 applications, totalling just over $484 million that has already been paid out to businesses to support them to retain their workforce. MSD generally aims to process an application in 3 working days, but managed to get some payments out the door on the very day the scheme opened. And I want to acknowledge again the hard work of the Ministry of Social Development staff in processing so many applications in such a short period of time. I wanted today to provide just a little bit of a profile of the types of businesses that are applying for the subsidy, because I think it paints an important picture. The vast majority of applicants so far are sole traders or small businesses rather than big companies. Just over 72% of employees covered by the wage subsidy are employed by businesses with between 1 and 19 staff members. Nearly 10% of total applicants following the March 2020 lockdown were companies with 1,000 plus employees. And while it's early days, I can say that at this point we only have one employer with over 500 workers who has applied for the scheme. To all businesses, I want to say today, thank you for how you are adapting to the lockdown and adjusting your systems. There is a lot of resilience that has been built up in the New Zealand economy. Rest assured, we are here for you if you need us to support you. I recognise that a semblance of normality is not the case for many businesses or workers right now. Anyone operating in the hospitality or tourism sectors has been hit hard by this lockdown, as they have previous ones. We are paying out the wage subsidy and the Resurgence support payments to support just these types of businesses, and we do encourage those businesses to tap into this scheme. As I've said many times before, for every business in New Zealand, no matter what type, size or location, a strong public health response is still the best economic response. And it is worth remembering the strong position we're in going into this outbreak because of that approach. By the September quarter last year, New Zealand's economic activity had already risen above pre-COVID levels, and we were one of only 4 economies to rebound so quickly. By the middle of this year, our unemployment rate was down to 4%, lower than when we actually went in to lockdown in 2020. And the economy overall has been performing more strongly than before COVID reached our shores. So I want to end by saying a huge thank you to everybody who has made that happen. Everybody is playing their part in New Zealand in this challenging time, but I want to acknowledge today one group in particular, the staff in our managed isolation and quarantine facilities. There are more than 4,500 people working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at these facilities, which are not the easiest nor the most usual of workplaces. They are the people who work to protect us from COVID-19, and they've not only supported more than 164,000 people to re-enter New Zealand, but they're now also supporting those who've tested positive in this current outbreak and been moved into quarantine. To everyone working in MIQ, whether it's the hotel workers, bus drivers, security staff, health practitioners, police or Defence Force, you are doing a great job and it is much appreciated by all New Zealanders. Questions? Jessica.
$62 billion pot of money available to help the economy through COVID. How much of that is sitting there available to help businesses?
So at the moment, we've got enough money to be able to deal with the wage subsidy scheme and resurgent support payments and still have a considerable amount left over. What we did was set aside money, and at the budget it was about $5 billion. But in addition to that, we have money that has not been spent on other business support programs that we've had. So, for example, we have $2.1 billion that wasn't used or hasn't been used in the small business cash flow scheme, around about another $1 billion in other support schemes. So in total, we have a significant amount of money still available within that fund.
How long will that $5 billion last us for?
Well, it's more than $5 billion. That's the point that I'm making. The estimate that we have from the Treasury is using the uptake of the previous wage subsidy scheme. We're talking about a $2 billion level for those fortnightly lump sum payments. But it's likely to be less than that because, as I said before, those larger businesses are not at this stage applying for that. But I want to stress the $5 billion is merely the amount that we'd set aside for resurgence. There are underspends in other parts of the fund that mean we have significant resources available. I'll just let you finish, Jess, and then
So how much is left in that overspending? If you've got $5 billion, how much can you add to that?
Well, as I say, there's at least $2.1 billion there in terms of the small business cash flow scheme and around about another $1.5 billion that we're aware of. That takes us far into the future. But I also want to say and reassure people that's not the only funding available to the government. The economy has recovered sufficiently well that our fiscal headroom, that's the amount of money we have that won't see our debt get back to where it had been projected to be, is much greater. So there is no shortage of funding here. The New Zealand economy has been incredibly resilient. That's a result of the strong public health approach that we've taken, and we can reinforce that approach by continuing to obey those alert level 4 rules and also continue to support people to be able to stay attached to their jobs. Jenna.
Dr. Bloomfield, the concern that vaccination rates for Māori in particular are really low. What's the government doing to help lift them, specifically because this outbreak seems to affect the Pacific?
Well, before the outbreak started, we already had an idea of what the vaccination rates were by each age group. And actually for Pacific, they were similar to or slightly higher in each age group in the Pacific population compared with non-Māori, non-Pacific. For 55 and over, for Māori, they were comparable as well, either approximately the same or higher. It was the younger age group amongst Māori where the real focus needs to go. And there has been from the start, and there are increasing efforts to reach into both the Māori community but also really engage with the Pacific community, and especially in Auckland. I dare say the rates were lower in South Auckland for Pacific than in other parts of the country. So as you would anticipate, there is a big effort going on now to target that community.
Pushing for a first approach for Māori will be to prioritise the first doses. Is that something that you look at?
It's certainly something we have already had a bit of a look at, and in fact one of the reasons why we advised and why government decided to extend the interval from 3 to 6 weeks was to allow a greater number of people to have that first dose sooner, and that has already paid dividends.
And bear in mind, Jenna, from the 1st of September, everybody is now able to book their vaccinations, and that's when a lot of that targeted work to get alongside Māori and Pacific community groups really kicks in, because that's that younger population where we know there's a higher percentage of Māori and Pacific people within those younger populations. So you can expect to see those groups really ramping their work up. We'll just come down to Jason.
Dr. Bloomfield, last week on Friday, the Prime Minister said the peak of the current outbreak is going to be this week. Today we've seen the highest amount of cases. Are you anticipating today being the peak of what we're seeing, or are we expecting to see it escalate up over the next couple of days?
Just before Dr. Bloomfield answers, I assiduously listen and watch all of the press conferences, and I have heard the Prime Minister say a number of times it's 8 to 10 day period. So we're not there yet in terms of where we would expect the cases to peak up. So just be clear that that's the time frame she's been working on.
Thanks, Deputy Prime Minister. So the first comment I would make is, yes, we've seen an increase today, but reassuringly, we're not seeing an exponential growth in case numbers. So that's good. And we're also seeing that the vast majority are in Auckland, with all the Wellington-based ones linked to extant cases. We will likely see further increases over the next 2 or 3 days, and the modelling suggests that, and if you look at the epidemic curve, it suggests that. However, we will be moving into a position where we will have identified all the cases that might have sort of arisen before we went into lockdown, and so then we would expect to see all the new cases be known contacts of existing cases and or associated with that. We may not be able to make a direct person-to-person link, but we will be able to link them to an exposure of interest. So that's what we will be looking for specifically in the coming 2 or 3 days.
Joe.
Just on,
sorry, one from you, Jason, and then Joe.
Just on of the 148 so far, have you got a number of how many have been partially and fully vaccinated?
No, we don't. I don't have an update on that, but we will see if we can collect that information.
Joe.
All right, so we'll leave the press conference there, but if you're wanting to watch the rest of the Q&A, head to our website, onenews.co.nz. Here are the main points from the press conference. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield saying just then that cases are not rising exponentially, which he said is reassuring. There are 41 new positive community cases, 38 in Auckland, 3 in Wellington, 148 cases in total. Now, 58 cases linked to the Samoan church in Mangere in Auckland. They're calling it the sub-cluster. A record number of vaccinations yesterday, more than 60,000. Joining us now is reporter Jordan Rudd, who has the latest from Auckland. Jordan, Dr. Bloomfield told us the queues are not quite so long at testing stations. What about what you're seeing out there?
Kia ora, Wendy. I'm at a new walk-up testing station in Auckland CBD, just down from Albert Park. It opened at 10:30 this morning, and since we've been here, it's been quiet but steady, and was a push from Auckland Central MP Chloe Swarbrick. Now, she's been quite vocal on Twitter, saying while Auckland CBD is a place where people come to work, study and play, it's also home to 40,000 people, 30% of whom don't actually own a car, making it the electorate with the lowest car ownership. And before this testing station, the nearest testing station was 5 kilometres away. Now, the CBD is also dotted with many locations of interest, as we've heard. One officially confirmed this morning as Revive Vegan Cafe, just up the road on Lawn Street.
And Jordan, 9,000 people, we were told today, are self-isolating. You mentioned locations of interest. What other locations of interest have been added to that list?
Yeah, it's an ever-growing list, isn't it? Now at 421 locations, 16 were added to the list today, some of which have been reported but not yet officially confirmed. I'll go through the list. We've got Revive Vegan Cafe, just mentioned before, Western Springs College, Crystal Laundromat in New Lynn, Bunnings, Mount Roskill, Crave Cafe in Morningside, Mobile Petrol Station St Heliers, and Pack and Saves in Royal Oak and Sylvia Park, just to name a few. So head to the Ministry of Health website for more information, including dates and times for those ones. They're updating that list every 2 hours. Wendy.
Yeah, that's really important. Thanks for that, Jordan. Jordan Rudd, live from Auckland CBD testing station. Well, thank you for watching this One News special. I'll be back with more on the Delta outbreak at 6 o'clock tonight. Good afternoon.
Whether your week's been
amazing
or
a complete nightmare,
it's always
satisfying to come to the end.
So pour yourself a cuppa, let off some steam and enjoy One's Friday night lineup.
I'm so excited!
In the repair shop, it's all coming together.
That is amazing.
I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
While in the sewing room, everything's falling apart.
Are we allowed to take the arms off the child?
I'm trapped.
Now you're just being silly in the repair shop. Followed by the Great British Sewing Bee. Friday on One.
Yeah, I'm on my way. Did you get a message about keeping your eye on Billy?
Yeah, and I don't want to get involved.
Oh, Belle, come on. All you've got to do is just take him to pub at dinner time.
Whilst you do what?
Nothing. I just think it'd be good for him.
What are you two whispering about?
Oh, but we're not.
You cannot stop Liv and Vinny seeing each other. They need to sort